How did I feel when I stepped on the scales in January 2020, 2 years into my weight loss journey, only to peer past my belly, squint at the LED screen and learn that I'd not only regained all the weight, but added 2 extra pounds for good measure? Honestly, I felt crushed, embarrassed, completely disappointed in myself. But looking back now, that moment was the turning point that really did change my life forever. It set me on a path that 3 years later led to something I once thought was impossible. Looking in the mirror and seeing the kind of physique I used to only dream about as a chubby teenager. Now, you might be wondering, what does any of this have to do with guitar playing? The answer is a principle that I've applied to many areas of my life, guitar included. It's something called the 80-20 rule. And today I want to show you how applying it to your guitar practice can help you to break through plateaus and finally gain the kind of fretboard freedom that once felt impossible. Now, just a heads up, everything I'm going to be showing you today, you can learn in my new course, 80-20 Lead Guitar Mastery. If you want to check that out, there's a link in the description box beneath the video. The idea is simple. In any field, there's about 20% of knowledge that truly moves the needle for progress. The other 80%, it's often fluff that distracts you and keeps you stuck. Most people, they spend way too much time focused on the 80%, the stuff that doesn't move the needle. That's exactly what I did for the first 2 years of my weight loss journey. I was chasing magic bullets, extreme diets, long fasting windows, and brutal gym sessions to try and out-train my bad eating habits. Nothing stuck. It wasn't until that wake-up call in January 2020 that I finally shifted gears. I stopped looking for shortcuts and I started focusing on the fundamentals, the 20% of fat loss advice that actually works. A moderate calorie deficit, walking 10,000 steps a day, and lifting weights 3 to 4 hours a week. Simple, repeatable, and sustainable, all focused on that 20%. And after a few months, I knew this is something that I can stick with for life. But here's where it gets interesting. I realized I'd unknowingly followed that exact same principle years earlier when I broke out of a 5-year intermediate rut on guitar. I studied music at university in Edinburgh from 2013 to 2017, and I learned some helpful things, sure, but also, a lot of the curriculum was fluff. Endless jazz theory rabbit holes, exotic scales, sight reading drills I've never once used, not back then in Scotland and not now as a full-time guitarist here in Nashville. I didn't want to gain knowledge purely for the sake of being able to pass an exam. What I wanted from my time there was to develop high leverage skills that would actually help me sound like a pro and get gigs. So even back then, I started focusing my practice time on the things I suspected mattered most. And just as importantly, I started to ignore everything that I was slowly realizing to be a waste of practice time. And one of the biggest light bulb moments I had during that time had to do with the modes of the major scale. When I was a teenage guitar player, I was obsessed with trying to master all 7 modes, because that's what every guitar magazine, every book and DVD told me I had to do if I wanted to be a serious player. But here's the truth. Not all 7 modes were created equally in terms of utility. If, like me, you play blues, rock, country, or any combination of those styles, there are really only 4 that matter. Ionian, which is the major scale. Dorian. Mixolydian, and Aeolian, the natural minor scale. These 4 show up in about 99% of professional solos. The other modes, they're useful in niche styles, sure, but most players never need them. And right now you're probably thinking, wait, what about pentatonic scales? Great question. When you go deep with these 4 modes, you start to see something pretty cool. The major and minor pentatonic shapes are built right into them. Watch this. Here's A Ionian, and here's A major pentatonic. See the overlap? And now here's A Dorian, and here's A minor pentatonic hiding right inside it. Same thing with A Mixolydian, and A major pentatonic, and finally A Aeolian, with A minor pentatonic baked right in. Now, if you're watching this and thinking, wait, why has nobody ever shown me this before? Well, it took me years to figure this out on my own, right? And that's exactly why I created 80/20 Lead Guitar Mastery. It's laser focused on the 20% of lead guitar concepts that will actually drive progress, and it ignores the 80% that simply won't. So when you understand these 4 modes deeply, not only are you covering the most used melodic material in modern guitar solos, you're also learning how to blend these modes with the familiar, highly musical patterns of their pentatonic siblings, the shapes that you already know and love. For instance, if I play licks using just the minor pentatonic, it might sound like this. Not bad, but when I weave in the surrounding notes from the Aeolian mode, it adds a whole new layer of melodic depth. That alone opens up your sound so much, but what really levels up your lead playing is going one step further by targeting chord tones inside those 7-note scales. What does that mean? Well, check out this lick. Notice how every note feels locked in to the backing track. There's 3 chords in that backing track: A minor 7, D minor 7, and E minor 7. Now, one of the most common questions I get about soloing is, Ross, do I need to switch scale for every chord in the progression? Like, if you're playing over the track that I just played over, do you use E minor scales for the E minor chord, D minor scales for the D minor chord, and A minor scales for the A minor chord? I completely understand where this question is coming from, and if you've ever tried it, you know how hard it is to pull that off in real time. But here's the good news, you don't need to do that. That track is a minor blues in the key of A minor, so the main scale I use is the A Aeolian mode, aka the A natural minor scale. I already mentioned the main chords in the progression: A minor 7, D minor 7, and E minor 7. Now, here's the trick. Instead of constantly switching scales, you can stay anchored in A Aeolian and outline the chord changes by emphasizing the right chord tones as the chords change. Chord tones are simply the notes in the chords. It makes perfect sense that if you land on the notes in the chords you're playing over as and when they appear in the progression, it's going to sound appropriate, right? It's going to sound like you know what you're doing. And the most efficient way to do that, triads and arpeggios. Just like pentatonic patterns, triads and arpeggios naturally exist within the patterns of those larger 7-note modes like Aeolian. When you learn how to target them, your solos stop sounding like you're just noodling aimlessly through large scale patterns and start sounding like music. Let's start with the most basic example and work up to something more melodic. I'm going to play a simple pentatonic line that targets just the root in each chord, the E minor 7, D minor 7, and A minor chords as and when they appear. When that E minor 7 chord arrived in the progression, I targeted the E root note. I did the same when the D minor 7 chord came around, by targeting its root note, and then the exact same for the A minor 7 chord. It sounds connected to the chords, right? But let's be honest, it's a little basic sounding right now. So now I'm going to use triads, which bring in 2 more notes per chord to outline the chords even more. This was the shape for the E minor triad. This was the shape for the D minor triad. And this was the shape for the A minor triad. You've played these before in bar chord shapes, whether you realize it or not. And take a quick look at the diagram on screen to see that yes, these triad shapes do exist naturally within the patterns of A Aeolian. But now let's go one step further and play minor 7th arpeggios for each chord. This is going to add 1 more note per chord, meaning we've got 4 chord tones to play through in each. So hopefully now you're realizing the power of going deep with the 20% of lead guitar concepts that actually move the needle. It might seem like focusing on just 4 7-note scales won't be enough, but when you go beyond learning them as mere visual patterns and start realizing what's been hiding inside those patterns all along, you'll realize there's so much more progress to be made with each of them. And what I've shown you today really is just scratching the surface of what's possible with the 80-20 approach to lead guitar. This isn't about playing less or being lazy with your practice. It's about making sure every minute of learning is focused on the stuff that actually matters for your progress. If you're ready to stop spinning your wheels and finally get clarity on what actually matters in lead guitar playing, the link to my new course, 80-20 Lead Guitar Mastery, is waiting for you in the description box beneath the video. I hope to see you inside.